Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to New Worlds November. This is a new BookTube event. I'm one of the hosts. It was the brainchild of Scott and Becky at the Bookish Bryants, and it's designed to celebrate science fiction. We're celebrating science fiction for the month of November, and the form we're taking for 2021 is short stories. Who knows what future iterations of New Worlds November will take? Could be long sagas, gigantic doorstops, canonical science fiction, but this time around we decided to ease in with short stories, anything fewer than 200 pages. And I decided to further narrow that down by reading the square-bound periodicals that currently publish original science fiction in America. The Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, Asimov's, and Analog. This is the new November-December. This is the final issue of Analog for this year. And search through them for the themes the prompts that we're giving you every week. The prompt for this final week of November is dystopian or post-apocalyptic. End of the world as we know it. We've gone from aliens to time travel to robots and AI. Now we're at the end. And I had a feeling that going through these current year issues, just 2021, would give me plenty to talk about. And there are a couple of stories in this issue that technically qualify as dystopian or post-apocalyptic. But I chose the one that was most explicitly that, and it ties in with something that I said yesterday in my long doom and gloom throat clearing about this prompt. I said yesterday that, much like robots and AI, dystopian and post-apocalyptic is a kind of science fiction that we are starting to live in the real world. It isn't just wild extrapolation anymore. We're able to tell not only what it looks like in the present day, when, half of Greece catches fire, or when the ice caps, when the Greenland ice sheet is melting at a rate that core samples show has never happened before, or so on and so forth, raging wildfires in Siberia, 90-degree temperatures in Siberia. We're in that world now, so we're able to see that. And I had a feeling that, just from what I've been reading, I've read these magazines all year long. I'm rereading them now for New Worlds November. I had a feeling that would infiltrate the groundwater of what current science fiction writers are thinking about and therefore writing about. And I wasn't wrong. I wasn't wrong. There's a short story in here by, I want to say Mike Wood, but the author's name is actually MJKE. I have no idea how you would pronounce that, so I'm going to call the author Mike Wood. And this is Kayomi's Water Music. And it takes place, the dates are never really sure. It's a short story, but the dates are never really sure, but it's still relatively in our world. And it opens with an author, a guy who's just signing books at a book festival. But he is there. He's away from his family. His family did not make the trip with him. He's there to sell some books and maybe listen to a few other panels, a few other guest presenters, and then he'll go home to the Bay, to the tropics where his family lives. And the guest speaker that he listens to is a woman named Kayomi, who is a musician. But she has a set presentation about catastrophic climate change, and says that it is all a function of sound, that it's not wrong for her to be making this presentation in connection with playing a musical instrument. There's a quote here that I want to read you. The ocean is a vast collection of musical instruments, an orchestra of unimaginable size and complexity. Each bay, inlet, coastal shelf, each geographical component and crafted shape of the coast and seabed is an instrument playing its part in a hydrological symphony. A single estuary is an instrument tuned by the density and temperature of the water, a standing wave stopped at both ends by the coastline, modified by the friction of sand and rock beneath. It is an instrument played by the musician's bow that is the moon and the sun, in regular rhythmic strokes, amplified and tuned by the Coriolis force generated by the spinning earth. And like my cello, the vibrations of one string influence those of the other, unbowed strings, drawing on partials, harmonics, and each tuned by the same master instrument maker, Mother Nature. We give those complex musical notes a name. We call them tides. And this musician has also done calculations about catastrophic climate change, about specifically sea level rise. And according to her, when it happens, it will happen very fast. And that fits with some of the models that I have seen from non-science fiction authors, from actual climatologists, who say, don't think of some aspects of this as generational. They won't be. They'll happen in very little time, and there won't be a way to reverse them. You don't get an Arctic ice shelf back if it you don't get it back the next season if it melts away. And that's what happens at the climax of the story. The musician's predictions seem to come partly true, and the narrator is suddenly terrified that his loved ones are at sea level. He's terrified of that. And that is an example of what I was talking about yesterday, that I think we're going to see for the rest of this week, that authors that we find in these things are going to be very much looking at the current day's news, not always in the extrapolations of the future that science fiction writers look to. I think it's very interesting, if a little depressing, but that's the final prompt here. So I'm not going to any of the classic post-apocalyptic fiction, science fiction that's out there. There's a whole list of books that come to mind, but I'm not going to that. I'm going to these contemporary short stories. But I did also think, and I don't need to ask what you think because I already know, I did also think about making a list of dystopian and post-apocalyptic. Maybe half and half, maybe half the list great works of fiction and half the list great works of nonfiction, because it is, after all, Nonfiction November. I may make that list and skip a day of doing a story in order to give it to you. But we'll find out. I will ponder on it here at the old house in Vermont, and I will decide accordingly. Thank you, BookTube.